Everyone tells you the 1990s was when India woke up, when we liberalized the economy, became a nuclear power, and joined the global stage. That's the sanitized version they teach in textbooks, but this is the version of history written for school books. If you actually want to understand what happened between 1989 and 99, you need to look at the cold history of 7 prime ministers changed in a single decade. You need to look at the disastrous events: 67 tons of gold mortgaged to avoid bankruptcy, the Babri Mosque demolition, economic liberalization, and the nuclear tests. The terrifying secret nobody wanted to admit publicly was that India wasn't transforming by choice, it was being forced to transform because the old system had completely broken down. This isn't a story about vision or leadership. It's about a country held together through crisis management, political accidents, and eventually nuclear weapons. Let's go through it chronologically and see exactly what went wrong. In December 1989, he becomes the leader of the National Front. Now, here's what you need to understand about this government. It wasn't actually a government in any normal sense. The National Front was a coalition of parties that had nothing in common except hatred for the Congress. The left and the BJP supported from the outside, while inside, his own deputy, Davy Lal, was actively trying to replace him. He had huge support in rural North India. He wasn't interested in being number 2. The Prime Minister could see his government was going to collapse, probably within months. He needed something to change the equation entirely. August 7, 1990, he announces the implementation of the Mandal Commission recommendations, 27% reservation in government jobs for OBCs. The official story is this was about social justice, but look at what it actually accomplished. It created a structural wedge that fractured Indian politics along caste lines in a way that made him temporarily indispensable to OBC communities. The reaction was immediate and violent. Students in Delhi set themselves on fire. India was burning. And this is where the BJP saw its opening. L.K. Advani launches his Rath Yatra in September 1990, a chariot procession from Somnath, demanding a Ram temple where the Babri Mosque stood. If one side was playing caste politics, Advani would play religion. October 23rd, Lalu Yadav arrests Advani mid-procession. The BJP immediately withdraws support. The government collapses. He was out after only 343 days. He didn't fall because he governed badly. He fell because he deliberately fractured Indian society to save his government, and that fracture made it impossible to keep his partners together. November 10, 1990. He becomes Prime Minister, with just 64 MPs. The only reason he is there is because Rajiv Gandhi's Congress provides external support to avoid an election. By early 1991, foreign exchange reserves had dropped below $1 billion. That is roughly 2 weeks of import cover. India was weeks away from defaulting, which means the country stops functioning. No oil, no essential goods, complete economic collapse. And then came what the government did not advertise. Between March and May 1991, the Reserve Bank of India physically transported 67 tons of gold to the Bank of England and the Union Bank of Switzerland. They flew India's gold reserves out of the country and pawned them just to avoid sovereign defaults. The operation was silent, because if the public knew their country's gold was sitting in foreign vaults as collateral, the political consequences would have been catastrophic. He was basically presiding over a liquidation. March 6th, Congress withdraws support over surveillance allegations. The real reason, they wanted fresh elections. He left after just 224 days, but the next government would inherit an economy that had just mortgaged its soul. May 21st, 1991, Rajiv Gandhi is assassinated. Congress turns to a 70-year-old they had already sidelined because nobody else wanted the job. July 24th, Finance Minister Manmohan Singh delivers the budget that dismantles the license Raj. Industrial licensing abolished, import controls removed, the rupee devalued by nearly 20%. Understand the scale of this. The License Raj had been India's model since the 50s. It was a system where getting a phone connection could take years, where growth was frozen at 3% while East Asia grew at 10%. The leadership used the 1991 crisis as political cover. When you've just pawned your gold, you can push through reforms that would normally cause your government to fall. The crisis was the shield. It worked. Growth rates climbed. Foreign investment arrived. But simultaneously, the movement in UP was building. December 6, 1992, several 100,000 volunteers gather. Despite the warnings, despite the paramilitary forces, the Babri Mosque is torn down completely in a few hours. The government had the capacity to stop this. They did not. The result? Riots throughout India. Over 2,000 people killed in the weeks following. The long-term result? The demolition legitimized the BJP strategy. If you could mobilize enough people around a religious cause, you could accomplish things that the Constitution explicitly prohibited. He continued in power till '96, surviving by buying and managing individual MPs. But by the time he left, he was the last Congress Prime Minister to complete a full term for nearly a decade. May 1996, the BJP wins the most seats but cannot hold a coalition. Their leader resigns after just 13 days. What happens next is bizarre. A coalition called the United Front of 13 parties forms a government. They agreed on almost nothing except keeping the BJP out. The first leader from South lasted 324 days. The second, a former diplomat, lasted 329 days. 3 prime ministers in under 2 years. All of them fell because the Congress Party, sitting outside the government, kept pulling the plug whenever it suited them electorally. India's political system was fragmented. It proved that stable government was impossible without an external force to compel cooperation. March 1998, he returns, leading an 18-party coalition. He had learned from his 13-day failure. This time, the strategy would be different. May 11th and 13th, 1998, India conducts 5 nuclear tests. The world reacts with shock and sanctions. But look at what the tests accomplished politically. They created a national moment so powerful that no partner could afford to be seen withdrawing support. If you pull down a government after it makes India a nuclear power, you look unpatriotic. The tests made the government untouchable. Then came May 1999, the Kargil sector. Pakistani forces occupy the strategic heights. It was a massive intelligence failure, but India had no choice but to respond. This was India's first televised war. Daily coverage, battlefield reports. The entire country was watching in real time. And through all of this, the coalition held perfectly, because withdrawing support during an active war is political suicide. By July, the territory was reclaimed. He emerged as a wartime leader, and in October 1999, his coalition won comfortably. India finally had stability.